Hey everybody, Joe Moreau here with Return the King podcast. I just uploaded a brand new article at the website under the Cup of Joe blog called Francis's Teachers and the Bigger Picture, What Trads Are Missing. This is a very important article. I lay out the reality that a lot of people come down, especially firm when it comes to Francis, but yet they give Benedict XVI a pass, call him a trad pope, or they give John Paul II a pass, call him St. John Paul the Great. But even among traditional-minded Catholics, the same thing happens, where Benedict and John Paul are given the excuse of, well, they just didn't know any better. They tried their best, kind of a thing. If only they had known. But Francis, on the other hand, right, like that's the route they go. And the article, the purpose and the intent of it is twofold. One is to lay out the most direct influence on Francis was Benedict XVI, especially when he was Cardinal Ratzinger. And I go through some of the direct statements of Ratzinger / Benedict in regards to ecumenism, non-Catholic religions, the Jews, the Muslims, the need to not have to convert non-Catholics, all that kind of stuff, to show you the groundwork that was laid for someone like a Francis to then come in. I also explain why I think in many ways Francis is the least culpable of the Pope since Vatican II. And not only that, but what's often missed is that, Ratzinger really was the enforcer of John Paul II when it came to the whole fallout with Lefebvre. Ratzinger was the one arm in arm with John Paul II and really, again, enforcing, things against Lefebvre when that whole fallout happened in 1988. And these are things that I just think aren't talked about enough. But it's important to know that because these are important dots to connect. Otherwise, you're going to be buried with an inconsistency. And that's going to, create flaws in time in some way with how you're processing the crisis that we're facing. If you're going to criticize Francis, you have to connect that dot back to his predecessors. Like I've said before, if there was no Assisi Interfaith meeting of John Paul II, there wouldn't have been a Pachamama or an Abrahamic family house under Francis. And on that note, Benedict held more interfaith meetings in his reign in Rome than even John Paul II did. Visited more synagogues than any pope prior to him in history. So these are just the important dots that have to be connected. The other part to the article is, in a sense, a call to arms, a manifesto of sorts for traditional-minded Catholics. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is not just Catholics who go to a Latin Mass, but I mean Catholics whose eyes are open to the true extent of the apostasy. There's a lot of confusion and divide right now because of the whole issue with Archbishop Vigano and what we're supposed to make of him. And what we're seeing is certain traditional Catholics coming down hard on him, but making excuses still for Francis. And it's not much different than what happened in 1988 with Lefebvre and John Paul II. There were Catholics back then who were right on the same page as Lefebvre was until 1988. And all of a sudden they were coming down on him and exonerating John Paul II. Well, it's happening now with Vigano. Vigano sees the same evils that many of us do. And he should not be the focus, the primary focus right now of traditional Catholics. We have to make sure we are keeping our eye on the ball with the bigger picture and the true enemy, which I get into in the article. What we're facing and why it's important that we are of one mind when it comes to those things, because like it or not, we all of us have family, friends, and loved ones, colleagues, coworkers, associates that are knee-deep in the new order and, don't even realize the compromises they're making with error. And we have to be the ones reaching out to them. And that's why it's important to connect the dots and all this stuff and know what the foundation is. It's very important to know that. So the article gets into all these things. It's also why it's important that we don't, as traditional Catholics, waste time debating things that are not primary or essential. We have to be able to know what is primary and what is essential, which is what I talk about in the article. And I come at it from the vantage point, like I say in the article, I've been involved in this for literally over 2 decades at this point. A lot of people are, traditionalists in the past few years or very recent, or they're just waking up to things. But I've been at this for over 2 decades. I first learned of a crisis and my eyes were opened back in 2003. So it's been 21 years now since I was first exposed to these things. And I've had a lot of time over that whole period of time to study, to discern, to reflect, to bounce ideas off of others. So I come at this, hopefully, by God's grace, with a lot of wisdom and insight. Hopefully the article brings some clarity for that. So I would encourage everyone to head to the website, check out the article. Those of you that follow us on social media, we have a Facebook now. Please follow the page, like the page, share our content. Just search Return of the King podcast on Facebook and it should come up. Obviously, we're on Instagram. We have our podcast on YouTube and on Spotify. But we've been doing some posts the past just couple of days regarding this whole situation with Archbishop Vigano. And there's been a lot of confusion over it, and I get it. I understand it. But hopefully, I've put out at least one video trying to clarify. And I think it's important that we all realize, again, that the deeper issue is, what does Vigano see? And is it the same evil and error that we are seeing? Is it the same thing that Lefebvre was seeing back in the 1980s? And I believe it is. And hence, that's what I mean when I say, when Return of the King says we stand with Archbishop Vigano. That's what we're talking about. So hopefully, you can check that out. And if there's any questions, you can always message me. And I'll do my best to get to you and just talk with you and clarify things. But we've been trying to be consistent at Return of the King with our position on things. And we are in a confusing time. It'll get more and more confusing. And one of the things I also touch on in the article is some traditional Catholics who, they come down, again, they also come down very hard, not just on Francis, but on other cardinals and bishops that are in the new order. But these are these are members of the hierarchy whose eyes are being opened little by little. Okay, ever since the Francis regime kicked in, ever since this whole synodal path came to light. And by the way, Francis released a document yesterday, not sure many of you know this, where he referred to the church as, quote unquote, the synodal church 43 times, and only used the phrase Catholic Church 9 times in the whole document, But aside from that, there are forces for good on that side of the equation. It's just their eyes are being opened little by little. And this path for many of us is all baby steps. It's very rare to see somebody who overnight had their eyes fully opened and connected all the dots correctly, in a sense, or had a consistent foundation right off the bat. We're all trying to work at this little by little, and we have to be hardest on ourselves. Those of us whose eyes are opened, we have to be hardest on ourselves, where iron sharpens iron, but we have to extend grace to those whose eyes are being opened in little steps, and show by example and by our prayers, to help people see what's going on. And this same advice that applies to loved ones and family members all of us have in the new order that are trying to make sense of things. The chastisement of Francis's pontificate in many ways, as many have said, is a blessing, because it's opened up a lot of eyes for people. You still have the alternate sources coming in that are causing even more confusion, guys like John Salza, Michael Lofton, and others. But by and large, Francis's reign in Rome has opened up a lot of eyes, and people are trying to figure out what they're supposed to do to have a consistent foundation, but also to save their souls. And so when you meet people in that mode, walk with them at the pace where they're at and help them. Be patient with them. But for those of us who know better, whose eyes have been fully exposed and opened, we have to be harshest on ourselves, and always keep in mind, no matter how bad things are, we have to remain on the narrow path that leads to heaven, which means we're growing in holiness. We are engaged daily in the spiritual combat against vices and pursuing virtue. Too many traditional Catholics are steeped in vices and sins, especially sins of impurity. That's what my whole Men's Crisis podcast series has been about. 10 episodes, 12 hours. So keep on top of that stuff, fight the good fight, and let's do our part to plant seeds, save souls. God bless. Hey everybody, it's Joe Moreau from Return the King podcast. I am making a brief video while I go for my afternoon walk on the whole Vigano situation, because I've had a lot of feedback from people on some of the most recent posts I put up about Archbishop Vigano, and particularly me saying that I stand with Archbishop Vigano. I say Return the King stands with Archbishop Vigano. So there were a lot of questions. Fortunately, I even had some people unfollow me because of it. But the two most pressing questions I've received, or the points, I guess you could say, the points I've received. Number one, I made a comparison between Vigano and Lefebvre, and so what people have been mentioning to me in DMs has been that, they say it's different because Lefebvre wasn't sedevacantist, Vigano doesn't believe Francis is Pope. That's the first one. And second one I've heard is that Lefebvre made efforts to try to talk with Rome, and Vigano didn't show up. So let me just clarify what I mean when I say that I stand with Archbishop Vigano. Number one, obviously, I'm not saying that I agree with his conclusion about Francis not being a true pope. And all I can say is I've tried to clarify this 100 times, 100 different ways. I put a video up on our YouTube channel about a month or so ago why I'm not sedevacantist. There's a pinned post on my personal account at Joe Moreau that lays out my position on that. I think like the third slide talks about why I don't embrace sedevacantist position. I've put up stories and I've written articles refuting Benevicantism / Beneplanism, and it's in my highlights under Church Crisis. You can see some of those. And in fact, it's interesting because, Vigano isn't even really a classic sedevacantist. He would fall under that category of Beneplanism, or known as Benevicantism. And I've gone on record as saying I think it's an absurd position. It's the most ridiculous one I'm aware of. It's illogical. It's completely inconsistent. I've maintained that from day one. And so anyways, I don't know how other way to say that. So when I say I stand with him, I'm not standing with his conclusion. My approach to it is that if we're looking at his conclusion alone regarding the identity of Francis, then yeah, that's a disagreement. I think he's wrong on that. He's misguided. I disagree with him. So if we put that into percentage or ratios, I agree with him on 90% of things, and then the 10% I don't agree with. So my post is about the 90% that I do agree with. He and I could disagree on the conclusion that he draws, and that's fine. If I ever met him in person and had dinner with him, I could discuss my reasons why I disagree with him on that. But I'm not advocating that. I'm talking about the bigger picture of everything else he has to say about Francis's program, the Vatican II program. That's what I'm focusing on, number one. Secondly, regarding the whole thing about Lefebvre made efforts. Yes, Lefebvre, obviously, Archbishop Lefebvre, may he rest in peace, made efforts with Rome. Even he came to a breaking point in 1988 with Rome, Rome was playing their political games with him, trying to extend things out to prevent him from doing his episcopal consecrations, his ordinations. And finally, he just, at one point realized, it's time, it just has to happen. And he went ahead and went along and did it in 1988. By 1989, he was saying, there's just no talking with this hierarchy. They're corrupt, they're compromised, it's just the way it is. And so, it's more in that spirit that I'm talking about. Vigano did not go to Rome as requested, but, the part that I focus on is the fact that, had he gone to Rome, I'm not sure what people are hoping would have been accomplished, personally. Vigano's not going to compromise on evil and error and corruption and heresy. So I don't know what else would have been accomplished. And it doesn't seem like Francis wants to address some of the concerns that Vigano brings up to begin with. We all remember the dubia from a few years back, and Francis basically ignored that. So, but anyways, my major point had to do with that the part that I do agree with Vigano, which is that he has seen the same evil and corruption that I see, that many others see, that I believe Archbishop Lefebvre also saw. He's seen the same evil in front of him. Lefebvre saw it with Paul VI and John Paul II. I have videos on that, on what Lefebvre was seeing the decade prior to doing what he did in 1988. And Vigano has been seeing it with Francis. And I don't know how anyone couldn't see it with Pachamama, the Abrahamic family house. The whole question about the blessing of homosexuals. I've made my points on that as well. I have a video called Strategy of Modernism, of the Modernists, if you want to see what my position is on that. Communion for the divorced and remarried. All sorts of issues that go down the line. But, he's seen the same things. He's been vocal about it. And that's really what I mean when I say I stand with him. I'm standing with the fact that he sees the same evil, corruption, issues, errors, that I would see, that I believe Archbishop Lefebvre saw. He's seen the same thing happen. I don't have to be a Saint Vacantist, or definitely not a Benedict contest, to stand with him. I can at least say, we're seeing the same things. And yet we can disagree on our conclusions from that, and that's fine. But I still see the same thing he does. And I was telling a friend the other day that, I do disagree with Vigano's conclusion as far as, again, the identity of Francis. And that's fine. But it's like I probably have much more in common with him than I do with many other people who would see Francis as being a valid pope. There's just much more that I would probably agree with him, because I'm not afraid to see the errors for what they are and call them for what they are and call it evil, So that's what I mean when I say all that. Bishop Strickland came out today. I just put a post up on Return the King about that. It's basically saying the same thing that I'm saying right now, so even he's seeing it too. So we see McCarrick get a pass. We see obviously guys like James Martin get a pass. Not even just a pass. James Martin gets promotions from the Vatican. So in other words, we're all seeing the same type of stuff. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's the same thing I believe Lefebvre saw. That was the comparison I was trying to make between him and Lefebvre. Obviously, Lefebvre wasn't Saint Vacantist, and I wasn't trying to say he was, just as I'm not. If anyone wants to know my position on all that, like I said, there's a pinned post at my personal profile at Joe Moreau. Feel free to go through it. I think it's 9 or 10 slides. I go through my position on that. I talk about the evil kings of the Old Covenant, how I find a connection, a direct correlation to that with what's happening today in this time of apostasy, as Our Lady of Fatima talked about. And to me, it connects a lot of dots. You're all welcome to see that. But I'm fine disagreeing with Vigano on that point. And I'm fine saying that Benevacantism, I still believe, is illogical and inconsistent. But apart from that issue alone, unless that's the only issue people are looking at, but apart from that issue, basically almost everything else I'm going to say, well, yeah, I agree with him. I see what he sees. I'm seeing the same thing, and I stand against it. So that's the point that I'm trying to make when I say that I stand with Archbishop Vigano. I'm asking, Return the King is asking for prayers for him, 3 Hail Marys each day this week for him. That, he stands strong in the face of all this, because we do need more bishops to call out evil and error for what it is. That's the important thing. While everyone is focused or freaked out on, these issues of, what about his, he doesn't think Francis is a pope and all that, again, I made this point recently in a reel that I did, a response reel to Michael Lofton, which is also, you can find on Return the King and on my Instagram, and on our YouTube channel, I think. But same point I made. People are very concerned about the 0.1% of Catholics who might identify as Vacantist, or even the 0.1% that identify as recognize and resist SSPX, when we really should be putting the focus more so towards the 99% that are compromised with modernism and false ideas, because that really is, by and large, the bigger picture, that's out there. We just have to keep that in mind. That's obviously, to me, much more concerning, because that's much wider, larger, and prevalent. So anyways, I hope this video clarifies those points. I'm making it because a lot of people DM me basically the same few points, and so I wanted to kind of just hash it out in a video. It's easier for me to do. if they're, yeah, it's, but same, any questions or thoughts or comments, feel free to send them my way. And hopefully, again, that clarifies things. And God bless all of you.